Sarra, saçudu sasa.
Saçut sasasra.
Taring anzo di. Sawa shishara di demba shikol tendo shara. Da. Tashi. Tari shuko tu jinza.
So now, at this point, we will stop the root text, our discussion on the root text. Oh, sorry. So we'll stop our discussion on the root text here today. And since today is a Buddhist festival, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, today is the festival when today is the occasion when the Buddha gave the first set of teachings. So as such, maybe we take time to reflect on the first set of teachings that the Buddha gave, the Four Noble Truths. So are you aware of the first teaching, the Four Noble Truths? Yeah?
Yes.
Shingis.
Sanje chumde ani tanda khalor. Da. Ji ne karsne sho doje de la ani ngobar jo sanje ni. Sha shibju shegula ani suncho na yo mare la wara. Chirang na rishi dan shele ani ti jela ani Quran ge ta jela wara na se phe ne ani di khonga de zambola ani kasa. Nembashi chi kola tomat ko rel.
So it is said that the historical Buddha, after attaining enlightenment under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, stayed silent, absorbed in meditative equipoise for 49 days, and he refused to give any teachings initially. And it is said only when he arose from that meditative equipoise, he traveled to Varanasi, wherein he came into the first five companions with whom he was meditating, and it is said that these first five companions became the first disciples who heard the Buddha's teachings.
Ta demba shide kala na chunzu be ha ko ra dungen demba kunjun demba gobe demba lamge demba shi.
And it is said at that point the Buddha gave the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of cessation of suffering, and the path, the truth of path that leads to the cessation of suffering.
Chidangi judan debu gi chen shawena tambo dungen damara. Jinde rumbe ndo dan chena dungen dema tambo ani mare kunju dema tambo ani dungen dema che. Ani lamge demba ani gobe demba. Chidangi ma jimche jinde ndo dan chena de.
And when we look at the manner in which the Four Noble Truths are presented by the Buddha, then they weren't really presented in a causal progression. Because if we notice, if it was presented in a causally progressive manner, then it should be the case that he talked about the origin of suffering first, and then the truth of suffering, and then as opposed to teaching the truth of cessation first, he should have taught the truth of path which leads to cessation first.
Ani jule chewa da dasugiti kirang rimbe wanda chewa na ani tambo dungen dembara dungen de ngosone ani tinde dungen de jukare dosan ani kunjung le cheba chewa tene ta kunju de hakko ndugala ta de dungen gi chunsa ishi kunju imba hakko na ani kunju te ani tende dungi jusa shidi pa kaya duye mindu ta de ani ngoba tende nyawa ta ngoba tende na ani tende kaya dugla na ta yeme ta ji chene kaji ye par hakko na ta ju khari thone ka ko ra ko de mangsa ju kola da kaya ge thamang do khar du ta na ani lamden la.
So, as opposed to that, the Buddha presented in this manner, taking into account that this is the manner in which you would actually, through your practice, come to realize these Four Noble Truths. Because it is indeed the case that when we are able to first recognize suffering, then we can only begin to then reflect on the origin of suffering. And now on the basis of recognizing the origin of suffering, then you would begin to reflect on whether you can actually strive for cessation of suffering. And on the basis of being convinced that indeed there is a manner in which we can overcome our suffering, which is this cessation, then you can actually begin to cultivate a path or a practice which can lead to freedom from suffering.
Tatila shedang de ni gwe chida dalara jinde te jiribe anche ta ane nyomo kone chui duden dungen la wata antire tala karsana nangshan shoji de bata takalo kone nyomo shoji de bala ni she.
So these two, when we look at these two manner in which the Four Noble Truths can be presented, one is purely from a philosophical or purely from a causally progressive manner, wherein you talk about the origin of suffering first, then the origin of suffering, then the path which leads to a cessation of suffering. Now, with regards to our own actual practice, it is the case that we have to first recognize suffering, and on the basis of recognizing suffering, then we can begin to actually look at the origin of suffering. So, as such, this causally progressive manner in which we look at the Four Noble Truths is philosophical, sort of a philosophical outlook to it. Whereas when we are looking at the manner in which the Buddha actually presented it, it comes by taking into consideration the manner in which you actually overcome afflictions, overcome suffering.
아니 칼라나 당아도 콜 코단들 디시기 톨 코디오라 데마 담보니디 나도 콜 코디아체 데마 시마니디 아니 퀄리티를 바시는 거.
So in this presentation it is also maybe helpful to understand that the first two truths, the truths of suffering and the origin of suffering, describes the manner in which we are bound to samsara, and whereas the last two truths, the truth of cessation and the truth of path, describes how we can effectively free ourselves from samsara.
Pachna dunge shiode dunge la china shira mamdara penen juwi dunge dunge juwi dunge chaba deji dunge sumshi.
So when we look at the first truth, it's the truth of suffering. So herein we have in our reflection on the truth of suffering, we are advised to recognize suffering for what it is. And herein we talk about three types of suffering that we need to recognize. Suffering of change, and the pervasive suffering of conditioning itself.
Tapana ngazo dungi la de khandeji shawarla na pena chita ngazo koi dungi na de baji la ya digala na yu dungi chayu dungi mabusta on tendela ani dungi.
So the first of these is the suffering of suffering. Now we do understand that our very existence is marked by suffering in the form of aging, sickness and death, but on top of that we also have experiences of physical distress, pain, suffering and so forth. These we do recognize. So that's the suffering of suffering.
Dungi de ngusin de uda ngazo dungi ba hakwan lamsara chita dungi sun nalola dungi chaba deji ki dungi de tes thabo chira ta ani tanjur dungi de khandeji shala ngazo khatu batana dewa yin bajila ya ani te tembo me ba kali dungi ngo njiro chila chara pena khandero shala ngazo pena chi tanda namshi thamu de kala ta nimaro shana pekiu sare sam ani ngazo chi ge nalo shur thamu ngazo shirul de nimande Tabo de because of peculiar, you might be treated in peculiar. The nature is the anti doing one jeroda. Ra, Chidanga Chilega Carina, deliver ship to a gangi chime. That's something you doing. Ra, Katu down the Deva in Bachelor, Jerry which till a lost journal, doing one jeroda.
So now, out of the three suffering, it is said that the third type of suffering, the suffering of pervasive conditioning, is the most difficult to recognize as suffering because it's the most subtle form of suffering, which actually pervades all of existence. Now, as opposed to that, the first one is easily recognizable. Now, the second one is a little bit more difficult to recognize than the first one because it's the suffering of change. And the suffering of change herein refers to the fleeting nature of what we hold to be pleasurable, what we hold to be pleasurable, to be fulfilling, and so forth. For example, they do not abide in their nature as being an experience of pleasure and joy the more you partake in it, this kind of suffering. For example, right now the weather is a little bit dark, gloomy, and then you wish that it should be sunny. It could be sunny. And then if indeed the sun comes out, then you would say that it would be really, really good if the sun comes out. I would be happy. But after 2-3 hours of the sun, then we have the same complaint. Maybe if the weather wasn't so hot. So that's why the experience doesn't abide as joy. It changes into that of suffering later on. That's why it's called suffering of change.
다 주로 동일의 동에 따더니 메다다 데로 뜻이 알코반 시에 마타나 아니 동에 고 주로 선뜻 하고라 주 동에데 또또 다 쳐버들이래도 레하버죠 말지 밥에 있어도 다 데시 말은 남서라 직 사람 또자 사람 남샤도 지기 예바 아버지 마히데 페지칼 커버죠.
So now, the third type of suffering, the pervasive suffering of conditioning itself. Now this is very, very difficult to recognize. And now when we look at the first two kinds of suffering, then even animals are able to recognize the first as suffering. And the second type of suffering, human beings to some extent are able to recognize this as suffering because something doesn't really, many things that we pursue, that we run after, do not really abide as an experience of happiness the more you partake in it. This we do recognize. Now as opposed to this, the third type of suffering, pervasive suffering of conditioning. Pervasive because it is pervasive from the tip of samsara to the depths of hell. So as such, it conditions all existence in samsara. And this is very, very difficult and too subtle for us to immediately recognize. And it is said that only truly developed spiritual practitioners, such as practitioners on these ground levels, these grounds that we described, they are able to recognize this as a form of suffering.
다 kunjung la de gala nga chu ji ma chi khalor tanda dungye chaman jungse gi shi ra ta de ji kunjung la khasna pena le ji kunjung da nyumong be kunjung la ni ra.
So then this is the manner in which we should reflect on the first truth, recognizing suffering for what suffering is by reflecting on these three types of suffering. Then moving on, the second truth is the truth of the origin of suffering. Now herein, as the name suggests, we are looking at the cause of our suffering. And it is said our suffering has two causes or two origins, which are karma or action and afflictions.
Chitan dinala manu. Zere tad ma bus kudu to she goin. Jide kunjung tanda kunjung rochi la ja, ji kunjung rochi change number sinjira. 다 간지 많이 갈라왔나 근데 kunjula 안저 동해 거 만주사기 시지라 근데 인디 갈라다 근데 동해데 주사임 바 하코 사디 갈라 다들 민데 바이 아니 안저 고발라 되네요 파카이 그라 까에 두에 민도 따오데 아니 까지 바따오데 아니 고바 되네요 알아 근데 담보는데 로시다데 kunjula 아니 넘버로 가르샤스나 지 kunjung rap지 change 넘버는 시샤
디 세보지 고츠마스케
근데 kunjung 덴베 넘버 시라 주 kunjung ju causes la ju kunjung ane rapchi change na ba ne tashi tawas de man na de jira
Rabje la na?
rapchi la ne chi yan yan che a chuni ro shira chida gi tare ne ko yor pena ande la ida te ane kunjung demba la loba shiba as dunge jimi den zaba go ba pe kashi dunge la ju yo mar lan te de zaba doya ichi de ta tashi tawas tsangi ba do shek do ane ji kona la te ne zaba zaba ta lo ashilo ta te ma yige chira ta tombo de ta de karsa na saje ni ne ji phumbo chu jin ji namba inde ane dunge ji is tsawa yin bi shirres la jiza de le ngana zo lu de saje ni ne ji phumbo de ane karsa dunge de ma inda de karsa na ane dunge ji tsawa yin bi shirres ngana zo tanda lu nyonsa dunge nyonsa de karsa na ngana zo saje ni wal phumbo de ra de la share.
So then, in our reflection on the second truth, the truth of the origin of suffering, it is important first to personally reflect whether our sufferings are indeed causeless, or does it really does it have a cause or not? This is first important to reflect on, because if our sufferings are causeless, then it cannot really be helped. It comes about it on its own. So as such, it is first important to reflect on the cause, and as in the reflection of the second truth, the truth of origin of suffering, we first begin to reflect on how there is a cause to our suffering, and how this cause originates, and then on the manner and on the basis of these cause, how suffering begins to fester, our experiences of suffering begins to come again and again.
다들 근데 안에 등에 가서 건주된 뭐 처진스라 아니 가서 건주가 남바인데 단데 건주가 남변의 주 건주 랩치 체인지 남발라사 다들 건주가 남바인데 아니 란데 등에 야니 양데 제와치비 미시르스라.
So in this manner, first we reflect on the cause, that when we look at our experience of suffering, it is established through what we call the contaminated aggregates themselves, because we experience suffering within the continuum of our mind and body. So this is what we refer to as the psychophysical aggregates. So the psychophysical aggregates that we have are in themselves contaminated because they are conditioned by actions and afflictions. And as such, all of our experiences of suffering manifest themselves.
다든데 들 가서 랩치기 남아인데 란데 둥에 차도 제바라 둥에 빈정도 제가 나시 둥에 가리네 베 둥에 잡벌레 주라 뭐든지 임시르스.
And then based on that, we also begin to contemplate on how we continue to experience suffering again and again on the basis of this very mind and body.
근데 인자 안에 코로나 체인지 남바인데라 당주 줄을 자주 준비 망보셔 라 근데 인자 단다 주다 체인래 가서 체인 남바 체인데 안에 란데 둥해지 있어 렌치 지진 치베시미스 둥해 쩌와치 발라 주 어종고 주주주 녀레 렌치 지진래라 단다 되게 렌치 지진 치그레스.
Now the next kind of reflection is more technical, wherein you begin to look at how this, when we say that this psychophysical aggregate is conditioned by karma and afflictions, but we also look at the manner in which how this very psychophysical aggregates also serves as the condition, the empowering condition for our suffering. Sujari dishi. Chap dis chuna.
아니 안 고된 레드라. 당 고된 코로나 양 넘버 시샤. 고바 시와 자농 년중는.
Then moving on, the third truth, the truth of cessation. Now, when we begin to reflect on the truth of cessation, there are 4 points to reflect on. First, the cessation of suffering, gopa, Shiwara.
Gopa, Shiwa, Chano, Nyenjin, Nyenjung.
Nijung. So then, when we are talking about the truth of cessation, we begin to reflect on the possibility of cessation of suffering first, and then the pacification or total overcoming of afflictions, and then abiding in the absence of afflictions, and then finally certainty about the true nature of reality.
Tadende ngoba ko ta ko jinsere kala na ra gopala de chidang yang to karina pa ka pa do lora tinde inza ane tinde lenye mali pa pambe es tewa cheche la de tang anzo le da nyumo pa pambe ane tewa da ngoba la ores ra tinde ngoba de cheche es ngobe namba inde dunghe gobi kar dunghe gobi tewa yin bi shires.
So herein, when we are looking at the first point of reflection, which is cessation itself, cessation of suffering, then we understand cessation. When we look at the term cessation, it means cease or to stop. Now it is important to understand that this cessation is a separation which results from the total cessation of the causes, which are karma and afflictions.
Chini tagaran le da nyumo ra lenye mali ba pambe es tewa chujen ra tende wi tewa de chujen es ani shiwe namba da igala shiwa la jilasa shiwe namba le inde ani nyumo be es tewa yin be shiris.
So this separation which results from the overcoming of afflictions and karma is pacifying in itself, and as such it's an experience of bliss and peace.
Karma or contaminated karma?
Contaminated, herein karma refers to contaminated karma.
Okay. Sasa. Ta tanda da ichujin tagaran jache ani cha nombe namba inde pendi ngo chibi se tewa yin be shiris pemba da dewe ge ani tewa chibi ngo yin be shiris ra.
So then the third is abiding in the absence, abiding in this separation of afflictions and contaminated karma. So this abiding in the absence, in the separation which results from overcoming karma and afflictions is the source of joy, is the source of bliss.
Tadi kasana tara chujiran jache ani te chujin se ngenjung kin namba inde dungel hara munjo wi se tewa yin be shiris.
So this separation which results from overcoming karma and afflictions is the factor which brings forth certainty, conviction about the true nature of reality.
Tadila pena nga tsuta shiba ra tanda ngoba la tat ona tindegi karsana ngoba di pena duge ba kabe ge ani kaya ju tindegi ngoba dila tindegi yimba ina tati kaya gi lam karla tena sana lam ji demba la ra tindegi lam ji demba korana ya namba shir ani lam ripa dupa ani ngenjen nam
The sebuch hagmas
lam ripa ani dupa sakada kada dupa ani ngenjen thaingela ngenjung ruda tanda de ngenjen.
So then moving on, if this is the cessation of suffering, then it is important through that reflection we should also come to the point wherein when we become convinced about that there is a cessation of suffering, it is now important to effectively investigate what is the path which can lead us to that cessation of suffering. So as such, we begin our reflection on the truth of the path. And in the truth of the path, there are 4 points to reflect on. The path itself, the reasoning, the proofs, and then similarly a certitude or a conviction about the path.
다 코너 중에 아주 근데 안에 가서 람den래 ngo sunsa yishid karasna dami ngo sun to tobe sa ra karsa dami ngo sun to tobe shangsen thonam paro shaidra 근데 아니 대초진에서 람지 나바 인데 아니 타바 드버 집에서 람이 미셔스 타바래 트버 집에 아니 람레스.
Now, more particularly herein, when we are talking about the truth of the path, we are looking at a true path which can help us to overcome our suffering. So, as such, technically, out of the 5 paths, the path of seeing is posited as a true path. So, the path of seeing is related to cultivating and realizing selflessness.
근데 아니 담행고도 또 배신라 상생 통화받에 가르스나 아니 가르스나 젠지나 바인다 가르스 미시르스 대시 리빈 남바인데 단데 람 리발라사 리빈 남바인데 뉴모치 있어 냠보 람이 미시르스 그래서 그 리베 비진세 가르스나 뉴모기 냠보 치바다 아니 근데 리빈 람이 미시르스다.
So then moving on, so when we are able to recognize what exactly is the true path in the context of the truth of the path, which leads to the cessation of suffering, so the true path herein is posited as the path of seeing. So we will get to talking about the 5 paths later on, but at this point understand that true path in the truth of path refers to a path which can actually lead to the cessation of suffering. So as such, it is posited as the truth of seeing. And this truth of seeing is understood as cultivating selflessness or realizing selflessness. And now, moving on, when we are able to recognize what actually is true path, then it is important to understand the nature of that true path now. So at this point, it is understood as a process of reasoning, but more importantly, it is understood as a type of awareness, because that truth is perceivable, that truth is recognizable.
근데 디버를 랑가 디펜은 아주 통람라디 가르레스나 지다기 아주 람가여라 나는 단도 통람라데 초람 조람 통람라디 숨받려워 봐 아니 되기를 고람 아니 밀로람 사제 고바 더래 람샤고라 담보 랑가데 신서티버를.
So when we are talking about the 5 paths, so the 5 paths are the different stages to enlightenment. So the first path is Thangbo Jorlam Re Cholam. So the first is the path of accumulation. Accumulation herein refers to accumulation of wisdom and merit. More particularly merit. Path of accumulation. 2, path of preparation. 3, path of seeing. 4, path of no more learning. 1, path of accumulation. 2, path of preparation. 3, path of seeing. 4, path of no more learning. Golam. 4th is path of meditation, and then the last one is path of no more learning. Learning. So, as the name suggests, the 5th, the path of no more learning, is when you achieve enlightenment. And with relation to our own discussions about the 10 bhumis, that's the 10 bhumi now. 10th bhumi.
10th. 다든데 인데 답변은 초람라데 안다 시저이나 라 초로버치 싸와 근데 네거질래 단다 지당가 저지 선남그 초다 예시기 초래시라 근데 초지랑질시 마사와이나 아니 시칼로타 타바다 단지 쳔바 타에네랑 라저기 녀모 시와체라 근데 레하버입니다 초만부지 싸고라 다 오늘 다 선남그 초다 예시기 초래를 갈라올나 다 선남그 초로데 나저기 치바 피어다 과라도와다 렌지든 도 마부지 지고라 샤체라 소바 류기 깔려지 마부지 가서기 sonam gi tsola ra.
So now, if you want to know what is the path of accumulation, the path of accumulation in effect tells us that enlightenment also is not causeless. If you want to achieve enlightenment, which can offer a true cessation of suffering, then one must accumulate causes, and the causes are the merit and wisdom, and it takes a vast collection, a vast accumulation of merit and wisdom to effectively achieve enlightenment.
Ne karsa. Ale ta jolam la de gala pena nga zo toni ngusu do thwa la ani chike ta khalo thari ro da jolam la ya ma bo tre che mata tu la mo che shira kande jolam la de gala ani nga zo toni ngusu do thwa che bala ya ani chi nga zo joa da ngushi la shira de la pa toni ngusu do thwa che bala tha ni bo ro le ji de ro shi.
So the second, the path of preparation, as the name suggests, has to do with preliminary practices as well as actual practices, which can help us to directly perceive emptiness.
Ani tholam la de gala ani toni la so ba ra chi topa la lo de chi la te mo go pa la ngosun do thong thu nge ra de la ani tholam ma kar le nga si do le da si le khala ngosu thong do nge la chi dang ki topa de de go thong de la sha ma ngosun do thong tholam.
So then, at the path of seeing, as the name itself suggests, you are now able to see emptiness directly, perceive emptiness directly, without depending on any kind of reasoning or thoughts or conceptual elaboration. Herein, at the path of seeing, you are able to directly perceive emptiness.
가서 돈이 자라 돈이 헷갈려 가보다 남사 시해지면 서 통함을 내고다 무슨도 통하래 다 돈이를 전시장에 거하는 것도 차초라 되는데 옆에도.
So now it is important to relate the extensive discussion that we had about emptiness before to this understanding of the five paths. It is only at the path of seeing that you are able to directly realize emptiness. Up to this point, you still have to employ meaning generality, you still have to employ conceptual thoughts to think about emptiness. It is only at the path of seeing that one begins to directly perceive emptiness.
Would you mind repeating, going back to the accumulation of merits?
Accumulation of merits.
Repeat the translation.
So then, the path of accumulation, in effect, tells us that enlightenment also is not causeless, that enlightenment must be cultivated, achieved on the basis of causes. And these causes are merit and wisdom. And not just merit and wisdom, it takes a vast collection, a huge accumulation of merit and wisdom to achieve enlightenment.
세상에 선남 그 소리 예시 선남 쓸라 예시 쓸라면들 예시 그 소리에 가서 나는 저기다 알아보는 친이라 다 지금 저 지중청 볼라 봐 장와이나 근데야 직소소 로야지라 시럽 콘 배기 근데게 아니 지기 소는 비즈체들라 아니 근데게 사실 저 초들라 예시 그 초.
So now, when we are talking about this accumulation of merit and wisdom, merit now, as we understand, relates to actual practices of generosity, forbearance, and so forth. Now, accumulation of wisdom refers to development of the potential of the consciousness itself to be able to cultivate wisdom.
아니 고람라 데다 단다 다이라 pen cholam jolam tholam lisa tan lam ngai tan lam shibadi kasna golam la oresra ta pen nga zo toni ngo zo to la tele tene yang sen se komba cho piji tan nga zo sachu gi namja de piji golam ne le legor ra ta gi panin do don ji da cholam da jolam da du ga la sachu lego mare ra tane tholam che ta de golam ne ga la ni nga zo sachu gi da gi namja she ba ra ji da kun samale de yo pa chu ra.
So now, moving on, the fourth path is the path of meditation. Now, herein it is important to understand meditation. Herein refers not just the act of meditation, it refers to the act of familiarizing oneself with emptiness now. So, if we refer it back to our discussion about the 10 grounds, now out of these 5 paths, only from the path of seeing and part of seeing, one begins to really effectively reach these grounds.
아니 고람 그지라 아니 다 소소지 칼로 다 곰네 뇨아 태비지라 아니 다 하르 가서 다 딜레 고는 다 밀러람라 지라 텔레 잠 먹어 근데 상마 차선 차대 근데 이제는 바시 체험도 소소지 디 Thosamling 주마고에 근데 차서라
So then, moving on, at the path of no more seeing, then on the basis of gaining true insight into the nature of reality at the path of seeing, then familiarizing oneself again and again with that insight at the path of meditation, then at the path of no more lying, you would have completely imbibed this within your experience now. So as such, now you do not have to extend any effort towards overcoming your own afflictions. So as such, from the path of no more learning, now you dedicate yourself to alleviating the suffering of others.
다양한 수된 토랑걸로 되더라 토랑을 다시 시지도 띵을 찍라 차이바 라 다명수도 또비 아니 상세 토랑 버추진라라 남제 넘버인데 아니 타바 드버 치비 라인비 시르스 니바데 가서는 대추진스라 최제 집어제 아니 리베 넘버인데 뉴모지 님부 라인비 스터러서라
디도서
디도서 다들 숨바디 가르라나 단데 아니 근데 다명수도 또비 상세 토랑 버추진스 아니 주변 넘버인데 내리 무슨도 또베스 또베스 고네 람 친지 말로 봐라 람 친지 말로 봐 드버치비 임비 시르스라
So now, moving on, we were talking about the truth of the path and how it is first important to recognize what exactly is a true path that can lead to actual cessation of suffering. So as such, we posit the path of seeing as true path. That's the first reflection, recognizing what exactly is true path. Then, on the basis of that, we also begin to reflect on the nature of that path. So, we say that a direct perception of selflessness or a direct perception of emptiness is that which leads to the truth, to a true cessation of suffering. So, as such, it's a kind of awareness based on reasoning. This awareness, this perception of selflessness is an awareness. Yes? Awareness. Yes. And on the basis of that, now, in order to achieve that awareness, we look at that awareness as a form of realization. And the realization is only brought forth by constant contemplation.
다 단단데 담명수도 또 배상서 통람바도 추진스라 년전진 넘버 인데스라 시바데라 년전진 넘버 인데 두해 땅서 뇽모바 자와네스 시바체베 라민 베시르스
So now the last point to contemplate on is to develop a sense of certitude, conviction about this path in this manner, that indeed this is the path, this is the true path that can lead to complete extermination of the causes of suffering, complete extermination, complete removal of afflictions.
세상에서 다 덴바시디 칼라나 파베 덴바시를 짜라를 세대라더라. 디 가진 나오라나 아니 파바나지기 단데요데 아니 지포데달라 파베 덴바지 라고베 진세데 카르라나 아니 파바나지기 예스라 지파 따르 덴바임바 라 파바도 저 무슨도 똥어디 갈라 유일 코랑이 강토바나 신기 덴바임베 차네 아니 파베 덴발라 그래스 진짜 아도 집어서서 제올라데다 진는데 로종다 가리 남자들 리바 마신이라 로라 마자위 간사 집어서서 제오도 저기 갈라나 조안따라 메덴바임베 진세지 드네라 아니 카라 덴발라고 해도 가서나 파바도 저 간다 응순도 통라 코난저기 강통바나시 덴바임바들라 아니 파베 덴바임라 덴발 실라 그래스
So now, these four truths are called the Four Noble Truths. Now, in the English translation, it seems to suggest that it is referring to the truth themselves as noble. But in the original, it more closely translates to the truth of the noble beings, because this is the truth that they see. And as opposed to the truth that we see, which is mistaken. So as such, these four truths are referred to as the Four Noble Truths, or the Four Truths of the Noble Beings.
제가 다 근데들라 가르선다 단다던 게 히에도 고된로래다. 밥에 대마실라고 해. 다디 고바데 카르라나 아니 덴시 남샤 시구데스 가르서 덴바시기 남자들 간주 시군고래스라 아니 딘데 그 람룬나라 가르스 대단나 대신에 대바 체중 대바 첨보 가서 대신에 대면라 주라 아니 딘데 건라스라 대바 체중 건도스 랜드 마라스 무시르 진짜 대바 체중 참말라 아니 랜직 자마인 바야니안데 손여레스.
So now this is the kind of meaning of the term Four Noble Truth, and now we also need to understand the purpose of the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. And now, when we look at Lamchung Songre, Lamrim Songre, when we look at the Lamrim literature by the Tibetan master Jetsong Kapa, then he says that understanding the Four Noble Truth is essential, very, very crucial, because when we look at all the teachings in both the Mahayana and Theravada traditions, then the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths often, again and again, in both the traditions.
코알은 주바다나 세상에서 다기 대마 담번이도 코알은 주고래라라 아니 주바다 도베 네 남서 대와라 시베스 두바 힘베 남도 두바라 힌데 개체와 인라사 근데 인디가라 아니 근데 대마 시나로 담번이도 코알 고단시 그래서 대마 시만이도 코알 대단시 그래서 나도 코알 칸데스 코고도 다들 칸데스 제고도 디갈 베 개체 모임베 인자 아니 안에한테 송그래서라
So these Four Noble Truths were taught many times in both the Theravada as well as the Mahayana teachings. And then similarly, these Four Noble Truths are important because the Buddha summarized all the essential key points of the manner in which we are bound to samsara and the way in which we can free ourselves from samsara very concisely in these Four Noble Truths, within the framework of the Four Noble Truths. And as such, if you are someone who strives for liberation and so forth, this is crucially important, understanding the Four Noble Truths.
단다 쇼심바 람레 냠고나야 짜치지송다 라 아니 람레 냠고나라 가르송소나 두데 가서 두데 니미 삼라 맘베나 둥에 덴베기 니미 삼라 가서 베저 마제와이나스라 타바더니 치신 메제신레 가서 담보 알레 둥에 ng마스나 둥에들 타고베기 타 탄데 울로드 지기 말했라라 아니 건주 코에 주로 마산나라데 덴데 건주디 코알라 주세기 시 내가 그 지도도 들이 임바하마고나 덴데 산나 따마토나 아니 코에 짜와 쮸바 미시베스 코에 짜와 디바 찌바 쮸발라 디 주커리 임바하고 고라스 디하마고나 코에 짜와 쮸투마레 코알라 양양데 코디고레라.
Then similarly, the same Tibetan master Jetsong Kapa in his work Songs of Spiritual Experience stresses again that unless and until you reflect and understand the truth of suffering, you would never develop the wish to be free from samsara. And unless and until you reflect and understand the truth of the origin of suffering, then you cannot effectively cut the root of samsara at all.
다디올라 생각 하마니도 그래 실레스라 녜중 쪼시 땜바다 제정한테 시바 코알라 아니 녜번 준 거보다 쪼시 저 쪼고 봐시 땡고르 둥이라라 무슨 봐 근데 아니 코 강기 찐바 시버차스 코알라 가서 간데 코디도 코니 중이데 가르르 뜻신고에데 개청버레스 송다.
So if we are to develop a true sense of renunciation, a determination to be free from our suffering, from samsara itself, then it is important we also understand what exactly binds us to samsara.
근데 이제 다른 가서 타니 만보지 신야라. 그냥저기 막 동제로 다이기서 가서 사치진도 해봐. 저 야방에 봐체 다른 가서 람가지도서 람가데 가르 갈래 가르실라나라.
So now at this point it is important to reflect back on the many new terms you have come to learn now. And well, we discussed a lot of new terms. We talked about the 10 bhumis, we talked about the 5 paths and so forth. So what are the 5 paths?
Accumulation, meditating, and then you don't need to learn anymore.
What's the?
덴바시리 가르.
What are the Four Noble Truths?
Truth of suffering, truth of the origin of suffering, the cause of truth of the cause of suffering, and the path of liberation.
네, 참을라요, 신발.
sensation.
그래, 그런 줄 알지. 너무 친지.
Maybe you can answer. What are the Four Noble Truths?
Truth of suffering, the first truth is the truth of suffering, which includes the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change,
Hmm.
and the suffering of conditioning. Then the second is the origin of suffering,
Hmm.
which includes karma and afflictions, maybe. Then there is the truth of the cessation of suffering, and then which has to do with finding the true nature of reality. And then there's the path to the cessation of suffering.
Hmm.
That is the path.
네, 참하고서.
Yeah,
아,
well,
봤다. समझ गया?
Yes, yes.
हाँ.
100.
Yeah.
Two questions, maybe, but like
try
what
this.
would be a good and easy text to read for the Four Noble Truths in depth? Because on YouTube there are like first coverage of Four Noble Truths, but in a very strong
Look at His Holiness the Dalai Lama's little booklet. There is a small booklet which is a transcription of a public speech, public teaching he gave. It's called the Four Noble Truths. I don't remember if it's an introduction to the Four Noble Truths or is it the Four Noble Truths. It's a small booklet. We have it in the library.
Any video recommendation, lecture recommendation?
Lecture, there are a lot of lectures. I cannot think of one at the top of my head.
Secondly, based on everything that we've been studying, the emptiness and noble truths, I couldn't help but feel lost as to which path be on or where are we going in general. Like, because of course, because things are interdependent and things don't exist, so then I just can't help but think that whatever I have been doing till now is meaningless or worthless kind of thing. So how would one identify the path they are on and be able to find some meaning? Because
Path to where exactly?
no clue. Like, of course, the end according to Buddhism would be liberation, but in general to find the meaning.
I don't.
Like, after going through these teachings, right? What would be? How would one identify the meaning?
Meaning, I don't understand the question at all. So you said that, okay, we learned a lot, but when you reflected on your own life, how do we exactly?
This would lead to, so for me, this is leading to a sense of meaninglessness, more on the nihilistic perspective.
These discussions and reflections?
In general, because it makes you question what all have you been doing till now and how somewhere weird it is and not
Tapong
purposeful.
ngejong ke rain sirda.
음.
Kohala nimu mejo do thongo dos ra. Pa cheta do ala lhoma yin samsang yung dos. Tandang anzo gi tuero da tudur lubu mambo cherwas. Demba shida la so bala mambo chen de zamba. Tanda bodo khari che sha jo je kanga la nimbu shida mejo da thongo dos. Cheza ni susu gi ta loje do che la ra. Ngagi shube lam di nore norma re samsam la tak. Khandis donglen chegores.
네. 네, 당아도 지난 미 미치래도 지난 근데 통해 개천버더라. 먼저 찍 독도로 이 미치래네. 당당 아주 미치 더 찾을 상당한다. 뭐 미 전부 지 싱라 같이 소소 가서 단전 왕게 저런부 지 되게 삼. 근데 되게 삼 되고라 아니 디다 저런부 되나 가서 차시 주고라. 라. 대차시도 두어 쳐라 아니 내 차시 당 컨트롤 가지 참 먼저 라렌 따려. 라. 배나 미지 산이 시야이라나 거기 대샤시다 콘동 아지도 싫은 것도 주도만 딱고산이 로야 tradition 당아도 지 저런부지 대 차시나 지 주사야 사야 동야 대사 답에 뭐 tradition라 대 지원도 갈아야니 지게 안쪽에 로마로 뭐지 나중에 제고 차기다.
So this is indeed true. Human beings are very strange in the manner in which they live their lives. Even though they know that at the end death awaits for them, but they live their lives in a manner in which it almost seems as if they are eternal. They keep making plans. They keep taking the future for granted. So as such, you begin to make a lot of plans about your future. And in the process of trying to actualize these plans, then a lot of the afflictions become manifest in our actions. And now, as opposed to that, try to think about this. If someone really knows that they are going to pass away tomorrow, then would they be as consumed by these afflictions?
지상에서 미다버도 선선의 가르평을 나라 미다버도 선은 다운되게 아니 지변은 미 산이 랑신이나 라 다 산이 미시 되줘요 말 근데 이 미지 있는 갈래는 산 가르당서 라 다가 저런 뭐지 대야겠지 다가니도 내가도 지금아 다고 산이 로야게 트디 인디갈 아 지크 소소라 가르여 봐야나 되서 좀 봐. 배변자라 봐. 드는 제라 찍대야도 뭐도 다디갈라 사디갈라 인가니레라네 쇼쇼 지금아 저라 가르여 봐 상마 샤야라 나는 저걸 타는 나는 저 루이네 샤네 되라 라 먼저 남시 집부 시도데 남시 집부 텐도라 드르갈랑 아주 선한 가르실레서 세상은 좀 상다 메타바 가지는 공부를 라죠 라 근데 공부도 아니 근데 취를 지단 힘보면 봐 근데 통네 어느 지 자신도 좀 용도야 시더라도.
So now, try to think about it in this manner. Why exactly are we advised to reflect on impermanence in our daily lives? Now, if we want to understand this, maybe we can hypothetically imagine the same situation again. If someone knows that they are going to pass away tomorrow, then would they still have that sense of attachment towards their material possession? Would they still have the sense of arrogance about not wanting to mend the relationships that they have broken? Would they still continue to live the same kind of life the only day that they have in the same mindless manner? Would they want to mend their relationships, make their interactions more effective, and not hold on to their possessions, being able to let go? This becomes manifest at that point, right? So similarly, that's the purpose of reflecting on impermanence in our daily lives. To be able to make the best of our time, to be able not to encourage. It's the reflection on impermanence is not really to encourage us to see like everything is meaningless and so forth. That's not the purpose of reflecting on impermanence. With this hypothetical situation, apply now the same kind of logic. If you are able to think about impermanence in your daily lives, then you wouldn't hold on to and harbor resentments in the same manner. You wouldn't waste your time, waste your energy in the same manner. That's the purpose of reflecting on impermanence.
배는 미치다 산이 되네 튼도 그래라나 라 단다 전화서 돼서 샤 나라 사야 동아도 지카래요나 와 신도로 아무 좀 가래요이나 산이 돈이 있다 단다 참아 사토 말아 라 아니 저런저 지 로발라 파티게나 탑산나 바치게나 안저 테디 지기다 라 다이네야 양안저 안저 미슬네 가주 되어 하고 말라 다치나 멤버 가시기 또 손이 촌나니 셰르로 드네라마 안저 미슬들 쇼치네네 베 튼두레 단다 안저 우레 샤지디 마땅 야레마도나 다라 파도 사르차시마 라 나 쇼치네 안저 가주 되어 하고 말아 딜라파베기 안저 고고라 양 고고 참마 땅셔네 좀 강이 테라 라 딜라파베 디네야 딘데지 하코운 사디가라 단다 안저 지주는 부지 대기레삼베기 상노디가라 안저 준노로시지 두구다 디드가라 베 자신 첨부 반전 구선지 시고서시 남주된 곳에 딘데기 베 차담모서 추 첨부지 고는 두바마이 봐라 시당 안저 사야 동양 안저 단다 사진 얘네지 폼부지 내디가라 먼저 고고래라 딘데지 고고다 안저 루디 사고로 동고래 둘로 kon고라 딜레 템바지모도 딜레 체기야바지 베 딘데기 라야 시당 안저 베 파일라 드라마모사 디바마모사 딘데시네 야문다 봐 야 빈도가 당아 미타바레라네 참아 빠샤네 jelkangi thera.
So now, try to think about it in this manner. Maybe again, same kind of example. If you knew that you are going to leave Thosamling tomorrow, then maybe there are a lot of things that you don't want to carry with you. But up till this point, you have carried with you. Now, if you know that you are leaving tomorrow, you don't want this to be a burden for you. So you would give it away to whoever needs it. But up till this point, you have only harbored it for yourself. But at the moment, you begin to realize you have to part from this place. It becomes a burden. Only then you are able to let go of it. So similarly, reflecting on impermanence is to help us to let go of the manner in which we hold on to things, emotions, feelings, experiences, and so forth, which does not serve us at all. So, rather than that, and if we do that, then we will seek fulfillment in the wrong places. We will seek happiness in the wrong places. So, as opposed to that, reflecting on impermanence is to help us to seek true contentment, to seek true fulfillment. So, for example, we reflect on impermanence and death in this manner, that if you think really carefully about it, death is only a moment away. It's a flash of a moment. It's just that failure to inhale after exhaling. Right? But from another moment, that time is not certain. Nobody can begin to predict it. If we think carefully about it, it is indeed the case that death is a moment away. It's that failure to inhale after exhaling. But if we think about it also, then this moment is uncertain. We cannot ever say that this is the moment when I will die. So we have to balance these two understandings in the manner in which we live our lives, practically, realistically, rather than the manner in which we approach it, failing to appreciate that death is certain, but the time of death is uncertain. And then we live as if we live and we begin to run after possessions, experiences, as if we live eternally.
Yeah, so sometimes I have this discussion with my father, because he's a bit older now, and yeah, he also suffers from some diseases, and but he's still running around like he's my age, and then he has a concern towards me that I am not pursuing like a degree right now or like a career, so that's his concern of me. But like it's really funny to see how we both value different things and both try to kind of like help each other in that way, but don't really seem to come to an agreement on the matter.
The koi diwa tiwala na inde dor nyongwa do jera. Kurang abada kurang ni para diwa jera. Abada da logaro gensis inares ra. Ni ina yang ko nazai dene mamuna yares. Ina yang ko ta tandong yang pe khurbu yares. Dhamenda chedinge chigyama jugdinge yares. Ina ko ngala yang suta yende zamba yara. Ngala semsap da chengo dusra. Kurang lobjong che gi lache du tandong kharji san le yong mare la yado. Lobjong chene ni lakhiar male ne deya thanda yora so lobjong chene degree lengoro tende thandong male ne deya chidi zama ni nija gi phazu tadang minda are dosta in chigi chigla chig roba do chini duya re ne khaila gi roba che chema tu gyo do chagi dos
re de injele senku yor palagi chona chigoya de karasana chona kugi puyi me chandra chona la yapuchi chuna samero kesi chola lache lene karare lana cho lache yapuchi lena ani chik shungu lega la sobaraya ani lega karina chik lega yapu raya dan lache togu raya dan chona la maungpa yapuchi nguro chana sami konu diyo ra shimba chogo shugo jirani karataya ra ine di rabi jila di tsenze chisa tanga so jiden di gala de gudu gala lache laya dila tani ani chik lega raya pendo yora kesan palagi chola chitse tsiche dala kona yi puyi michi kona yi puyi michi ra
So it is important to appreciate others' concern about our well-being. Sometimes we lose that perspective when we do not really agree with them. For example, it is important that you appreciate the concern that your father has about you getting a degree. Now, it's not really about getting a degree if you think about it. Because the degree is just a piece of paper. But he's concerned about your well-being, your welfare. He wants you to get a good job, a good salary, which can help you live a good life. So that's his true concern, and it is important to appreciate that.
지난게 미 희가 퇴마도 연구라 가지 텔라 잡고 가시 려려 가시 배 제진배 보러 가시 따와래 퇴마도 연구라 이네 키랑 원래 다다빨 코란 찍 사야도 연로야 가래 코란 거도 되어라 게시빨라 경고차 네바로 차나 드디처럼 부임이 차니 키나를 하가지로 버친지 깔리 커버 드디처럼 이게 아빠라 갱큐고라 라 나타나 이제 디디 소소 까마가 두두두고 라 드디 아니 저는 갱요데 아빠라 유에요 라 하다부터죠.
Then similarly, you also have a responsibility towards your father. Right now, maybe both of you are healthy and you can go about your own lives, but you might have different values, different attitudes about things. But you have to remember that you have the responsibility to look after your father. Come the day he needs it. Because you have to think in this manner that there would be no one else who can offer him the same kind of help, concern that a son would to a father. Dene Geshema la Geshema kabuchagena kunzu tanda shida che sumda chegani shida chegajora. Kuranzu tudurda che. Dene Geshema la taring yesu shuna digira. So I was wondering, Geshema is not feeling well, so maybe the last session you can have like a discussion session among the participants themselves, so Geshema can actually go to a hospital and consult the doctor.
아니 단다 치는 저 드셔지 뭐지라 디가라 산노로 땅 돌린치 라 담다바다 직다 사드 주도도 산당 카버라 지금다 발란 소바 대실라 소바 단당아서 마부지로요 아니 미게지부 추릉 단어 소바 레마 두가라 아니 가서 기시딘데 가서 ngole chechuene chen khardu te pangwaina gechen khardu chana dende dolinchina digor ra.
So then in the discussion, I would advise you, rather than talking about the 10 bhumis and so forth, maybe try to have a practical discussion about the 10 non-virtuous actions, if we understand them, if we recognize them in our behaviors and attitudes, and to reflect carefully, examine whether when we engaged in such behaviors, did it really offer us any sense of fulfillment, or was the opposite true? And then similarly, try to talk about the importance of reflecting on death and impermanence in our daily lives, and why exactly is it important? How can it help us to live life with more purpose, more intention and meaning? And then similarly, try to reflect on our discussion about the Four Noble Truths. So let us conclude with the dedication prayer. Senju Rinpoche Maje Banan Chechu Che Cheba Nyamba Memba Ya Gone Gonde Pewa Shu Pawe Jida Chemba Dan Kwendo Zambo Deyan Deshende Deda Kunje Jesu Dalo Che Gewa Deda Damche Reda Ngo Desun Shebe Jawa Tamje Che Ngowa Kanlai Chodo Ngaba De Dage Gewe Tsawan De Gwenchang Zambo Cheche Reda Ngowa Je Pama Sunjen Tamje Dedan Denje Che Yendo Tamje Tado Tongwa Dan Chanju Senpai Ganai Susheba Deda Kunji Molan Duchu Chi. Okay, thank you everyone. See you tomorrow.